Metro for now for 10 years, but I've also been in the industry for about close to 25 years now, believe it or not. You're all saying you do not look old enough to be in the industry for 25 years, I hope. Yeah? Nod your heads. No? Okay. All right. So some of the challenges that we have in warehouses today, as opposed to years earlier, I would say one of the biggest challenges is workforce. That's a real challenge right now, especially post-pandemic. Trying to find people to work in warehouses is challenging at the best of times. If you were to sell a job to somebody picking fast-moving consumer goods that are heavy, so let's say water, for instance, we want you to go and pick at 200 cases an hour for 8 hours a day and walk around a distribution centre and you're going to walk kilometres and kilometres a day. It's a really hard sell. Safety has become a massive concern within warehouses as associated with that. Lifting heavy weights over continuous times, long times, long durations. And it's also not the type of work that most people want to do now. I suppose that's probably, I would suggest, one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest drivers to automate.
Alan, would you agree with that, or do you have some other points?
Hello again. I think we're just looking with Brett because we have worked on a lot of projects together back in Australia. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Brett. The workforce is at the moment is a big challenge. What we have seen over the last 20 years, it's the way that the warehousing has changed, right? So I would say from the last 10 years, what we have seen is e-com has come into more of a spotlight. The platforms like Amazon or the online selling, they have been developed a lot. There are a lot of those marketplaces on the market, which it warrants the having their own operation. Whether you have it at the vendor management tree or whether you have it inside the warehouse. I would say that one of the biggest challenges is the shift of the operation from only a B2B platform with key providers to having it from, now it's two divisions, right? So it's going to be the B2B and the B2B side, which they would warrant a complete different set of solution when it comes to the warehousing. So that's the challenge. Also training the workforce to be more proactive and productive when they are dealing with the e-com, right? So in a place like Australia, where we have a expensive workforce, of course, automation is the way to go. But therefore, some other countries which having the lower wage, which the business case doesn't stack up. That's how you train your workforce to work on the e-com side of the business to become more proactive and productive. So that is the main challenge. I think having the proper workforce, which is I think the scarce these days post pandemic, and also training them, upskilling them to be able to deal with the rise of e-commerce.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Ramon, you've been running warehouses for 20 or 30 years or so let's hear the fruits of your experience on this point.
Well, I think there's been a lot of change, but I also want to say there has not been that much change. We've been running LogiSYM together now for 10 years, right? And before that, we've worked together for a number of years. A lot of the challenges that we're talking about, automation, digitalization, scarcity of workforce, these are things that we talk about, we continue to talk about. Many of you were here with the keynote that MP gave this morning from Google, which was talking about a lot of things that people do with Google Cloud and the examples that she gave. Things have not changed that much in the sense that we still have a lot of the challenges that we've talked about and continue to talk about all the time. What I think has changed quite a fair bit is the variability of the options that are available to us. It's a more complex working environment, and certainly to your point about e-commerce, that's a whole different. If you take a logistics manager who works in an e-commerce organization, he or she is very different from an e-commerce or a logistics manager who works in a manufacturing environment. It's almost like a different industry, different profession, different mindset, different way of looking at things. in an e-commerce space, for example, speed, agility, flexibility, speed to market is key, and profitability isn't always the driver. Whereas if you work in a manufacturing environment, you buy low, you sell high, and the margin in between is your profitability. And that's how many of us still think. So things have changed, but the challenges continue to remain. I'm almost wondering, it's good because there's always going to be a need to have a LogiSYM because we're going to be talking about this time and again. So that's where there isn't a change. But yeah, it's that e-commerce space and the options and the complexity of the operation that's changed quite a fair bit.
So the point that was brought up by Brett about difficulties of getting workers, you don't think that's too much of a problem?
I'm a bit fortunate at this point in time. I'm involved in running a $130 million freight spend and about $60 million and $50 million in warehouse spend. But it's in the high-tech, the medical technology device space. Aircon working environment, nice cartons, small pieces, nothing more, anything more than a cubic meter is big. So it's a nice working environment. So finding labor, if you're competing for warehouse labor, we're the best place to work in. It's 20 degrees Celsius, small pick pack operation. Labor isn't really a challenge.
Maybe I can get a job there then. Okay. So Brett, I mean, okay, you and your company, you have a vested interest in automation technology and promoting that to potential customers. But I mean, I think Raymond touched on the point of different processes in different industries, and I'm sure even for you, there will be cases where technology goes from the scale of it's a must-have towards a nice-to-have, given our different variables of processes, industries, and labour costs. So how do you approach that in terms of your value proposition to customers?
Yeah, thanks. It's a very interesting question. I suppose the easy way for me to answer that is every system is different, and that's the key. We don't have a cookie cutter solution. We can't just roll out the same solution to the same customer because every customer has their own challenges. And Raymond mentioned it before, different processes within a distribution centre, different value mindsets for different customers. So something that's new is e-commerce, obviously in the last 20 years, as the rest of the panel has already suggested. And one of the big things that I hear from my e-commerce customers, especially the high-end e-commerce customers, is I need to improve the out-of-the-box experience for my customers. And that doesn't just mean getting it there on time or within expectations, but also what does it look like? I want to open it up. If it's a very high-value product, which in tomorrow's session when I present my presentation, one of those customers does have a very high-value product. It's got to look right. It's got to feel right. That experience has got to be similar to if they went to the store, for instance, and bought this very high-value item. And how do you replicate that in the home setting? It's a very interesting issue. So that's one thing that we have to do. But then I might have another customer, and it could be a very e-commerce driven customer, or mainly actually only e-commerce, and all they care about is speed of response. It's going to go in a box. It's either going to be this size, or this size, or this size, or this size, and I just need to get it there as quickly as possible. So build me something that will do it, Brett. Off you go. So there are very different mindsets, very different parameters around every different customer, and I think one of the key takeouts for me is whenever I go and see a customer and we are talking about automation, it has to be, will you tell me about your business? Tell me about what are your challenges right now within your business. I don't want to talk about solutions. That's the last thing that I want to talk about. I actually want to understand what your challenges are right now, and then we'll start to talk about data. Then we'll start to talk about what space you've got, what time frame you've got, and then we'll talk about some solutions. But until then, let's really understand what the problem is.
So coming from where you are down there in Australia and New Zealand, how often do labour costs come into the conversation? Or is it a case of, as you mentioned, customers are looking for more for speed of response, reliability and quality, those kinds of things? Does labour costs come into the conversation very often?
Yeah, labour cost is always an issue, especially in Australia and New Zealand, because the cost of labour is very high. As an automator in that space, I'm very fortunate. Cost of living is high, cost of labour is high, and the cost of land is high. So you've got the triple threat, which is good. But yeah, labour is still, even post-pandemic, challenging to find good, reliable labour, and it's nowhere near as cheap as it was a few years ago.
Right, okay. Alan, your thoughts on this issue about technology? Do we always need technology in warehouses?
Well, it's all about the reliability and meeting customer demand, right? So, of course, for the countries, as I said, with the high labor force, with high cost of living, I mean, if automation provides value to the customer, I think it's still the way to go. You just need to make sure that servicing the customer, meeting the SLA, meeting the demand is always one part. Also, the companies need to be profitable at the end of the day to be able to run their operations and keep their people, right? So it's just a matter of, you don't want to just put the automation and start losing money, because but there should be a balance, right? And one of the key challenges that comes with automation is your flexibility drops as your automation level goes up. So it's very important. So it's like a cross, right? So more automation, your flexibility drops. So that's why it's very important to find a balance. And that balance is all about the business case. It's about how much you save when you put that automation. Still we can do this more volume with the same level of people, so we're not gonna threat people's job. It's just adding capacity with the same level of workforce. Providing better service to the customer. But at the end of the day, if you put a lot of not necessary information in there, you just kill your flexibility. So it's a very fine line. To be honest, it's not a prescription that you can have it for all. It's very, very, in the warehousing space, is a very customized solution. And that's why 3PLs and the automation providers, they don't have like a package, okay, here it is, just go and implement this. It's a journey. So the consultants from two sides sit together, talk on logistics profile, and then come up with the best solution. So equipment is one thing, the solution is different for equipment.
And just to add to that, I don't know if you agree, but I believe you will. It also could vary within the same organization. It could be ABC company, but an operation, if you're running a DC in Singapore versus say running a warehouse in Australia, the solution that you want to implement in that consultative approach that you take could vary as well. So it's not just limited to different types of company, but even within the same company, depending on the geography that you're working in, or the growth stage of your business for that geography, or whether it's a DC or just a forward stocking location or a plant warehouse, how you're going to design that solution will vary as well.
So your approach around to the automation deployment in your facilities, do you have a prescribed approach, or is it really custom based on where you are?
Oh, so 100% is customized. And unfortunately, every time, and I've had the benefit of working with these gentlemen's companies as well, yeah. So every time we think, or and we're exposed to this because of experience of the work that we do, or attending LogiSYM, and we come here and we say, wow, SSI has this great solution, or SIVA has this great solution. I want to try and implement this for my company, ABC. But then that solution may not really work. It's not because it's a bad product, it's just because our business is not as sophisticated to require something like that. The product might not be of high enough value to warrant high automation, or if that increased automation, you reduce the flexibility that you have. And if you work in a very variable sort of environment, especially as we've seen in the last couple of years, automation may not be the solution.
Right. Okay. So it may be possible that for many people who are new to this, or maybe warehouse owners who are not so familiar with all the technology, they could perhaps get overwhelmed with all the different technologies out there, and even the acronyms, which I think you did a very good job of explaining just now, WMS and WCS. I would guess that WCS is new to most people out there. So someone like that who's starting out, what would be the best way, and then maybe some people in our audience is in that position, what's the best way to gain a comprehensive understanding of what fits where and how to structure an automation technology deployment? Would anyone like to get that up? Brett or Alan?
Yeah, I suppose I'll come a little bit back to some of the points that were made previously as well, I think, and then we'll kick it off into that as well.
Sure.
I think another point about automation and where it fits within an organisation, as Alan said, there is a sweet spot for automation, but it doesn't mean that it's a sweet spot for the whole solution. And I think that's something that people need to be reminded of sometimes. That yes, there is an area where automation will work really well, but there are areas where automation doesn't work so well. So for instance, if I am asked to automate the fastest movers in a warehouse, that's going to be a very expensive task. And it actually won't give a lot of benefit to an alternative, much more manual solution in terms of picker productivity and in terms of overall throughput. But in that mid-range to slower range of SKUs, automating makes a lot of sense. And you would definitely drive productivity and return on investment. Again, slower end, let's talk about spare parts. Only 60-odd thousand SKUs in the spare parts distribution centre. I don't want to automate every single one of those, that's for sure. There will be a lot of SKUs that are sitting in dead V&A racking or shelving or something similar, which is difficult to pick, hard to pick, but I don't go there very often, and it might only take 2 people all day to pick all of my orders in that area, and it equates to 2% of all of my order lines. Why would I automate that? It makes no sense. So that's all part of the process that we need to go through, and getting to the point of flexibility, and this is really where my point is, you need the system to be diverse, to be flexible as well.
So perhaps, when you talk to your customers or potential customers, what do you find is their general level of understanding of the technologies that you and other companies offer, and also the potential of those technologies to improve their businesses?
Yeah,
I guess that varies quite a bit as well.
Yeah, that's a good question actually. And if I cast my mind back even probably 10 years ago, I would say the level of understanding was relatively low, but not today. Most people have got a pretty good idea of what technology is out there and what works for their industry. And quite often it's hard to rein customers in from just wanting to go to the solution to start with, because it's very easy to sell people on the shiny singing and dancing things. It's a lot harder to sell them on why a solution should look this way. So we do have to go through that process. But to answer your question, I would say most people that we talk to these days have a high degree of understanding. Google has been a wonderful thing in YouTube, and it really has driven a lot of understanding and notice of this industry.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Brett hit the nail on the head. So, of course, the level of understanding has been increased big time. I remember when I started my career in logistics, the order of the business, especially in solution design, was, okay, this is the profile, let's go to the suppliers, and then let them advise us what we need in the market. Now, I can tell you the last 7 or 8, that actually has been changed, because now we have customers that actually coming with ideas, okay, CPL, can you do this for us with this type of automation? The solution designers or the engineers or the designers, they are coming with ideas, right? That the level of engagement in terms of understanding of the different type of automation in the market is actually has been increased that much that in cheaper work, if you are not proposing solutions, the alternative solutions, and proving that actually the ROI will be there or not, we will be our competition. So I think thanks to Google, but thanks to YouTube, the rise of internet, I would say, LinkedIn, the type of social network that promotes the types of videos. The consensus and the knowledge, general knowledge on automation, has increased not just on the back office function, like the analysts and the managers, but also on the floor. walking on the floor and talking to, for example, to our blue collar workers, for example, working, and they are coming like this. Hey, I have seen this video on YouTube. Why don't we, for example, use local service? Why don't we use AMR in this area? That makes a lot of sense, So it may not get business case there, but the idea is there, and they have encouraged them to come forward and share it. So it has become very fast.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Ramon, I mean, how do you manage to keep up with all this in your busy multiple day with multiple things going on?
LogiSYM.
Yeah. I thought you'd say that.
I think, just to expand on your point a bit, say the team that I manage, 60% of the team actually come from a 3PL background. So you've got people working in your manufacturing or your shipping environment as a BCO or BCO, where they've got that 3PL background as well. So that helps. But keeping abreast of it, it's also, and this is a real example. Q4 last year, we released a RFQ for a 50,000 square foot facility. And we cast the net really big or wide, and we invited 18 3PLs to bid. In the end, 12 said that they wanted to. And we got, I think, 8 responses. But interestingly enough, from the 3PLs who said that they did not want to bid, you think, I'm spending 5-10 million US dollars a year, 50,000 square foot facility, medical technology device company, very sexy business. But from 18, we got 8 responses. We learned as much from those who actually responded to the bid, as well as from those who did not respond to the bid. And one of the options that we had was actually to bring the DC in-house, and then working with the solutions providers. They also came up with good solutions as well. We went in with a particular mindset, as we all do, but picking that right pool of solution providers as well, they came back with good solutions. So it's also a partnership. It's not us and them. I'm sure these gentlemen will agree. It's working with your customer or your service provider, and coming up hopefully with A plus B or 1 plus 2, you get more than 3. Something that's more than the sum of the parts. But yeah, there is that opportunity.
I know we're getting towards the end of what's been a pretty long day, so we do want to keep you all engaged. We want to make this session interactive. So if you do have some questions at this point for a panel, or if you have your own comments that you'd like to make, please take that opportunity now. Does anyone like to ask a question or make a comment? I guess the answer is no. Okay. It is getting. Oh no! Well, okay. We have someone there. Thank you very much. Just get the mic over to you.
Yeah. Hi. I'm Prashant here from BotSync. The automation solution provider as well. So we build AMRs. But just want to understand. Since we talk about technology, how do we actually look at accelerating the adoption of technology in warehouses, especially in low-wages countries, where we look at, in Southeast Asia itself, outside Singapore. Because whenever we talk about technology, it's, of course, straight away the first adoption comes into the countries like Singapore, or New Zealand, Australia. So just your thoughts on what factors, as a solution provider, maybe what we can provide in the sense that will help to accelerate the adoption.
Yeah, so automation in low labour cost countries, which is an often asked question. So, someone like to, Brett, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I can. I think in low labour cost countries, you've just got to look at what you can do to take out some of the contributing factors to the cost of the labour, because even though it's a low labour cost, the cost is still there. So rather than investing an enormous amount of money on automation, there are several other ways that you can automate technology. And one of the things I will also talk about tomorrow is automation is different depending on where you are in the stage of life of DC. So if you are coming from a very grassroots base, for instance, you're picking to paper, You've got 150 pickers walking around picking to paper, who are ticking off items, putting them in a box. Hopefully they're putting them in the right box. Hopefully they're picking the right quantity and they're sending them out the door. That's a system that works, and it works, it's quite cheap. But is it accurate? Are you putting the right items in the right order? Are you putting the right quantity in the right order? And how much is that actually costing your business in returns or lost customers? So you've got to look at those sorts of factors as well. So to implement a picking solution in that situation would actually really increase your productivity and also increase your profitability, just purely because you've implemented some sort of automated picking solution. It doesn't have to be conveyors, doesn't have to be a shovel system, doesn't have to be AMRs. You know, it could be something as low level as that to start with, and then look at what the next steps might be.
But I think, you know, I've got one of our participants here is from Cambodia, the brewery in Cambodia. I think the largest brewery in Cambodia, smallest, yeah, the largest brewery in Cambodia. What you see in, say, the CLMV, the Cambodias, the Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, there is also this thirst or this interest or this hunger to actually learn new things and better ways of doing it. So whilst, yes, in a low-cost country might be a challenge, there's also that opportunity, and that's what we see at the society here. So this is not me in my daytime job, but in my part-time job in the logistics society. I see this interest for companies to adopt these new technologies and even leapfrog what we're doing, say, in Singapore, which is supposed to be more developed. Yeah? Partly because there's that interest. Secondly, because the huge scale of their operation. I think, and Inba, correct me if I'm wrong, one Cambodian drinks 6 cases of beer a month. Maybe more, yeah? No, I mean, per capita in Cambodia. So can you just imagine the size of that brewery operation in Cambodia? So even with that low-cost environment, you're not going to find enough people to actually run your DC or your warehouse. So you have to adopt that technology. So I think one of the speakers talked about it during the break, Inkiat from UOB. He talked about not just looking at those big shiny European and American companies, but also maybe the tier 2 players, because that's where a lot of the growth is. There's also that hunger and the thirst to learn, and there's also that willingness to take a risk. They haven't invested in that infrastructure. They also don't come in with this fixed mindset. There are different challenges, of course. Yeah, getting paid might be one of them, but there is an opportunity as well.
Yep. So the fact is, you know, a good solution is not always an automated solution. That is a fact. So sometimes with some very little, you know, enhancement in the processes of your WMS, you can actually go a long way. I mean, give an example. Like, for example, again, proper slotting, understand your ABC properly. So you, rather than you put everything in the warehouse and you go, you set up like a fast lane to put a like super fast movers. That could improve your productivity by around like 20%. One of the things, especially for the low wages countries, is as Raymond says, sometimes the automation is not just about the return on investment, but about being able to deliver the demand, right? So what needs to be done is a good solution, a good automated solution comes with a proper commercial term, right? So in a sense, in reality, if you want to run everything manually, with an example like a Cambodia, at the peak time, you literally don't have enough resources, you don't have enough staging area, you don't have enough warehouse to operate that. So you will fail anyway. And then just consider there will be like 4 times of peak during the year. Then you will fail. So guess what? You are proposing a solution to a customer that only works during an average time. So there are solutions, right? I mean, first of all, the company needs to be commercially protected, but there are 2 things. So you either build an automation on with the capacity to service the peak. Well, you're working not just running a day shift, but also utilizing your afternoon shift and night shift, so you can sweat the assets more. Which and then you do some sort of like a commercial proposal or commercial entry with the customer that okay, during the peak time, if I'm gonna get picked, then it's a fixed element on the payment of the investment, or maybe have a surcharge on the per unit fee that you're gonna charge a customer. So in that case, you can cover the cost of the unutilized automation during the non-peak time. That's one. The other thing is co-investing. So you're talking with your customers, you understand, okay, this is the situation. I have this warehouse, but it is not literally possible to ship out the orders working 24 hours. So let's co-invest and just share the investment. So that's the two solutions that that can work in terms of making the automation work again commercially, and also supporting your SLAs and meeting customers.
So how was that answer? As a warehouse automation company yourself, does that give you newfound hope for expanding elsewhere in the region?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, outside Singapore, we already see Malaysia, Thailand as one of the countries where we are already deploying. So, I mean, what is quite insightful to see at least certain similar countries where the hunger is there, and they want to leapfrog the technology adoption. And commercials is one thing which we are also constantly debating in terms of what kind of modeling, or what kind of price model, what kind of pricing model we can make sure to, so for customers, so it's easy to adapt. Yeah, thanks for those inputs.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Just behind, the next table, just behind, just over there behind.
Hi everyone, Daniel Albrecht from Haskoning DHV, engineering consultancy company, so we'll often be involved in the factory warehouse design from an infrastructure and from a material flow angle, so often then work with automation vendors or 3PLs, etc. My question comes maybe from Alan, your presentation on WCS and treating that as a black box, but I think then it's applicable to the others on stage as well. Do you see, in terms of the trend, where you see that going? I've seen examples of automation vendors selling additional modules, like AI-enabled, advanced planning modules then linked to their system, or the dashboards, right? I've seen it included in the systems as a base. I've seen clients ask for that as access to the data lake, right? And I think there's questions of who owns that. WMS is very clear, right? The client owns and can see all communication with the WMS. The WCS is a black box. Then there's often discussions about, can I get the raw data, right, from the WCS and understand, I want to know the routing, either the algorithms within it or just the raw data. I want every ping of data so that I can build my own optimization algorithms. I can better understand what's really happening in my warehouse or in my automation system. So interested in hearing your trends, maybe from a vendor standpoint. Do you guys give access to everything? From a 3PL standpoint, from an end user standpoint, Dr. Krishnan? Yeah. Where you see it going, what you guys are looking for? Thanks.
Yeah, so I think part of the question, maybe just Brett can help me in terms of elaborating, because WCS is their forte, to be honest. But the way that we have seen it is, like any WMS, how WCS has been evolved throughout all these years is coming from a fully customized pack to something as a standard pack, and then you can buy additions, right? This is the trend in the market. Like you're working with a supplier, okay, this is the base price of the WCS, all right? That gives you this functionality, that gives you this level of reporting, that gives you like a live dashboard KPI, that gives you some level of AI in terms of, for example, order processing and order patterning, and then there we go. If you want to go to the next level, especially on the maintenance side, okay, you want to have a dedicated developer, for example. Okay, we need to get this very specific report out of it. That's a must. You're going to get a B2B and a B2C functionality or stock segregation within that for the same software. That's another pack. So, and I think it's not a bad idea, to be honest, because a fully capable WCS sometimes is not what 3PL wants. Sometimes you don't actually use some of the modules. Some of them, it's like a WMS that you design it for spare parts. You design it for e-com, you design it for food, you design it for temperature control warehouse. They all have different type of functionality, and some of the functionalities that you're using for like a food, you're not using them for the spare parts. So I think the trend is going in such a way that you pick the package that is a right fit to your operation. Maybe Brett, add some to it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the key points for WCS is, and I'm very fortunate. I work for a supplier that can not just supply WCS but also WMS. The boundaries of where WCS starts and finish and WMS starts and finish are very blurred, and they blur for every customer, and they'll never be the same because some customers like to pick in their host WMS system. Other customers aren't picking in their WMS system, and they want somebody to pick for them in WCS. So we can provide that functionality. We have customers. All we do is route and sort. So we get given tasks to do, and we just execute them with the orders, and it's as simple as that. That's a very low level, what I would call WCS system. But the higher up and the more the lines get blurred, the more complex it gets, and the more reporting you need. And the more reporting you need to be able to run the business properly, to be able to understand where your hot points are in the warehouse, where you need to move labour to if you have a zone skipping or a zone routing solution, for instance. If the zone's particularly busy, why is it busy today? I've run a special and I've got all those items in the one zone. Whoops, I'm going to do something about that. So you need that sort of real-time data. Now, depending on the solution, depending on the complexity of the solution, depending on the requirements of the customer, we will provide a data warehouse, for instance, which has got all the data. We will also supply a reporting system that includes a base number of reports or more if you want more, the ability for us to create those reports, or if you've got some really good business intelligence guys working for you, they can create those reports in BI. So there's lots of opportunities, lots of differences, and I think in this space right now, those sorts of key, I suppose, statistical packages and management packages are what set us all apart. We talk about equipment a lot, but really the biggest thing that drives our distribution centres is the software. That's really the biggest key differentiator.
Okay, thank you. I do want to touch on this point of AMR, because both Brett and Alan mentioned this earlier on. So AMR, autonomous mobile robots, very much the new kids on the block, promising high levels of flexibility and scalability over traditional automation solutions. But my question is, are AMRs, are they this new kind of silver bullet, or are there some things we really need to consider before going out and buying lots of autonomous mobile robots? I know, Alan, we were having a discussion about this earlier on, so I'll give this over to you first.
Okay, I can talk about this till morning, so about AMR. So the fact is, AMR, like any other solution, it's good for a certain profile of products. So although it's fantastic, I mean, if you look at the SWOT analysis and the type of AMR, they're good because first of all, they are scalable. There's nothing bolted to the ground like conveyors that you're fixed with it, and then you have a set square meter attached to it. You can move them around. They are grid-based. You can move them from this, and within 2 or 3 days you can set it up in another location. You just need to set the QR codes on the ground. But they come also with some restrictions. Again, one of the main things is you need to understand what profile of CPUs you need to put into your AMR. So when we're talking about this type of automation, especially with the moving robots, we need to understand why we are using these robots. We are using these robots because we're going to reduce the travel distance, which is contributing to about 40% of the waste that you're having in the warehouse. So, it's very important. So if you put like a super fast product in there, you just kill the robots there. Because first of all, we are not talking about, like a racking that you can go super high, but there are parts, right? So if you put it across, one street across 7, you just kill the robot, just move them around the station. So that is important. The active learning needs to be done constantly, and that's why I just touched on the WCS part so you can get. The other thing is they're good for e-com, right? May not be very super efficient for maybe B2B, but under certain circumstances they will be. But they are more known for e-com operation. And I think one of the biggest challenges, to be honest, that we have with AMR, and I'm talking about the conventional AMR, well, conventional AMR, they're just to the market we call it conventional, is the amount of the air that you're wasting on top of. So they are very good for low warehouses, especially where the cost of the square meter is so high. Somewhere close to the city, something close to the airport, which the cost of the the warehouses are very, very, very expensive. If you're still using a very cheap warehouse, still there is a lot of air that you are wasting on top. So what is the solution? You either put a mezzanine, which is a lot of time, these type of robots, they require a certain mezzanine. They can operate on a mesh mezzanine. They can operate on a, but for example, for Australia, you can just put a piece of wood on top of it because of the humidity that it can form. So they need to be like concrete on top of the mezzanine, right? So that is, by itself, it'll kill the whole saving that you're going to get off the square meter. So there are solutions in place, like in Europe, they are using the deck, they are building decks on top of the under the docks. So they can use some of the space, but that is very commonly used at the moment. But yeah, I think we need to understand, if you have a very major grid, don't put it in the very high warehouse, because you kill all the gain and the yield of the pallet is so much.
So lots of thinking needs to go to that before you go out by lots of AMRs. Okay. In the interest of time, I will go to our final question, and to go back to where we started this conversation. This point is really about, with the increasing levels of automation and artificial intelligence, what skills does a warehouse worker need to stay employed, to stay relevant, and be a complement to the technology, to be a complement to all this new wonderful technology? The worker and automation together?
I really don't see that as a challenge, but the worker would need to be willing to actually learn and adopt new technologies, which, in my experience, running warehouses all over Asia or previously in the world, is not really a challenge. If you, a lot of people say or think that there's this rumor where people are worried about losing their jobs due to automation. It's a fallacy. I've never come across a warehouse. The largest warehouse I ran was in Chile. We had 1,200 employees in Chile, in South America. And these guys just wanted to learn how to do things better. And, with the proper training, guidance, implementation, they're off and running.
Okay. Brett, the skills of today's warehouse worker.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I agree completely with Ramon. I think for the average everyday warehouse worker, it's not going to make any difference really. It's actually probably going to make their lives easier. I think where the key difference is, it's the supervisors. They're the ones that really need to upskill, learn a lot more, understand a lot more, because these automated warehouses aren't the easiest things to run. Let's face it, it does take some special knowledge and skill set to be able to run them. So they're probably the key people in this day and age of warehousing that we need to develop collectively as equipment suppliers and warehouse owners and operators.
So it's that level of...
yeah, definitely.
Okay, that's an interesting point. And final word from you, Alan?
Yeah, I think as both gentlemen said, it's not going to make that much impact on the actually the blue collar on the floor. I think they will get interested and they will get engaged when it comes, because that's make their life easier. So the actual upskilling and the interest is being built as part of the journey. However, more training on the supervisor side, on the ops manager side is required to deal with outages, to understand how to use the automation. It's not just simply just handing over and the operators. There's a lot of knowledge in the background that may not sit inside sit inside the automation, but actually sits from how you feed the SKUs and how you feed the information into the automation. So that upskilling, I assume, is going to be on a little bit one level of the.
So people will still be important in the rest of the 21st century warehouse. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we touched on quite a number of issues, I think you'll agree, over the last 45 minutes, and I trust you will have, you know more about this topic than you didn't before this session. If you didn't, then come and see me and I'll try and find out why. But no, I trust that you've learned something very useful, and I really want to thank